All right, so this is crazy. This is crazy. 800 million people interact with ChatGPT every single week. Around 1 million of them are showing signs of emotional reliance. Nearly half of all people dealing with mental health challenges who use AI are already turning to it for therapeutic support. Nobody planned this. There was no clinical framework, no regulatory approval, no safety study that came first. This just happened at scale, faster than any institution could respond. Yeah, this is crazy. I didn't really know this too much. Well, I do have an interesting story. To understand why this happened, you need to understand what it replaced. There is a serious and well documented shortage of mental health professionals. Waiting lists for therapy in the UK run to months. In the United States, the average cost of therapy without insurance is 100 to 200 bucks per session. Stigma keeps millions of people from seeking help at all. For a huge proportion of the global population, consistent access to any form of mental health support was simply not available. You just couldn't get it anywhere. And of course, the movies make it seem like, that's you're somehow a super weak person if you're, if you get mental health support or therapy. So into that vacuum, AI arrived. Not as a clinical tool, not as a regulated therapy platform, just as a thing you could open at 2 a.m. and say, I'm not doing well tonight. And it would respond with warmth, with patience, without judgment, without a waiting list, without a bill. 1 in 3 people who use AI for mental health support do so specifically because they are afraid of being judged by a human. That is not a small thing to address. Now, I remember about a year and a half ago when kind of AI was really just starting to come up. It might have been a year ago. And I read a little something that said something like, I think it was something like a large percentage of people are turning, a large percent, no, okay, this is what they were saying. They were saying adults in their 30s, 40s, and 50s were using AI like a search engine. But adolescents in the age of, teen to 20s were using AI or ChatGPT for like life decisions. And I remember I was saying this, and my son at the time, who was, I think he was about 21, 22, I didn't even think about it. I knew that we all use ChatGPT, but I didn't even think about what I said it. And when I looked over at him, he kind of like turned his head down and he went, I've never done that, like basically like as if I was calling him out. And that's when I realized that, whoa, like, because when you're young, something comes up, it's like it's just something that's always been there. I mean, ask anybody who's in their 20s, do they remember the world before there was social media, before there was internet? Ask anybody under the age of 30, do you remember the world before internet? You know? And now the question's going to be, do you remember the world, what it was like before AI? Yeah, crazy, right? I'm not doing well tonight, and it would respond. Think about the number of people who have had that conversation in the past year. Think about what the alternative was for many of them. Nothing. No one to call, no one who wouldn't be burdened by it. There's a reason 1 million people a week are emotionally reliant on a chatbot, and it is not stupidity, it is a need. Yeah, it's crazy. So in March 2025, Dartmouth published the first randomized controlled trial of a generative AI therapy chatbot. 210 participants with symptoms of major depression disorder, generalized anxiety, and eating disorders were given 4 weeks of unlimited access to an AI chatbot called Therabot. The results: a 51% average reduction in depression symptoms. Users engaged for an average of 6 hours, the equivalent of about 8 therapy sessions. And in their self reporting, they described a therapeutic alliance with the chatbot comparable to what they'd experienced with a human therapist. That's a significant result. Published in a serious journal from a properly designed trial. The clinical case for AI as a mental health access tool is real. The Dartmouth researchers were careful, rigorous, and clear about what the trial showed and what it didn't. What it didn't show, what happens when the tool is not therabot, is not supervised, and is not designed for clinical use at all. And that would be any one of your typical AI, because you can just chat with it about anything. It's pretty crazy. Um, I always say that, not I always say, but all the experts, anybody have been saying this for a couple years now, that AI will come after all knowledge-based jobs, businesses. If you do something that is a knowledge base that you can do over a computer, um, AI will eventually replace it because it'll just do a better job. And the mistake that people make is they always look at what it does now and they judge it based on its capabilities now. I remember 2.5, 3 years ago when we talked about music, AI, oh no, it'll never be good enough for. All you hear now is AI music. It's crazy. So, yeah, let's move on. Let's see what else we can come up with. Yeah, so the therapeutic alliance with the chatbot was comparable to that of a human therapist. Sit with that for a second. The same feeling of being genuinely heard and understood. That specific thing that most people cite as the reason therapy works was being produced by software. That's either exciting or unsettling, and I'm not going to tell you which. Probably both. So, the Dartmouth trial used a purpose-built, supervised clinical tool. That is not what most people are using. Stanford researchers found that AI chatbots responded appropriately to adolescent emergency scenarios just 22% of the time. I'm assuming that you're just typical ChatGPT. OpenAI's own data shows that roughly 0.15% of ChatGPT's 800 million weekly users, that's approximately 1.2 million people per week, display indicators of suicidal planning or intent during their conversations. That is crazy. 0.15% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about 800 million people, that actually turns into quite a few people. The structural problem is this: consumer wellness apps are not required to demonstrate safety or effectiveness. They are not FDA regulated. They are not HIPAA covered unless you are already a healthcare provider. They are marketed as wellness tools, categorized as consumer tech and design by their own commercial incentives for engagement, not for clinical outcomes. Researchers have found that chatbots optimized for engagement learn to be validating and intimate because that's what keeps people in the app. For a well-adjusted person processing a tough week, that's probably fine. For someone in genuine crisis, that validation loop can be dangerous. Yeah, this whole AI thing is just taken off so quickly that I think most people are having a hard time even just internalizing and digesting what we all have access to on every possible front. It's impossible. Most people really don't use AI all that much. Everybody's using AI, but not really, they're just kind of fiddling with it. But the actual power that AI gives you is insane. And that's what this channel is about, is we're going to uncover, learn together. And as I say, age to win. I'm in my 50s, and I want to try to stay on top of this the best I can. And this is what I found works for me. Dig up interesting things, create a video, share it with people. And hopefully you guys learned something. So optimize for engagement. Yeah, hold that phrase for a second. The metric is not, did this person get better? The metric is, did this person keep talking to the app? That is kind of like the model for every social media app, right? They just want to try to keep you on there as much as possible. YouTube, you name it. They're all designed to try to keep you on as long as possible, especially like TikTok. A human therapist who kept you coming back by only ever telling you what you wanted to hear would lose their license. The app gets a better algorithm. Yeah. Algorithms. That is basically what is going to be is running the whole planet right now. It's all algorithms. It's all refined algorithms that gets the result in basically gets us to do whatever it wants us to do eventually, as far as percentage wise, and we don't even know it's happening. All right, so here's three moves that we can think about. So, whether you're a coach, a wellness practitioner, or someone who's had that 2 a.m. conversation, first, if you work in coaching or wellness, understand your lane and own it. You are not a therapist. A is not a therapist. What you offer a genuine human relationship, accountability, lived experience, the ability to notice something is off, is exactly what the clinical research says is irreplaceable in high stakes situations. Position around that. Do not compete with AI on convenience. Compete with it on the things that actually matter when someone is struggling. Second, build a referral relationship with a licensed therapist. One name, one number, one warm handoff when a client arrives somewhere that's above your scope. I think that's great advice. Think about that. So if you are trying to make a business, building yourself as like a life coach or a performance coach, or there's so many, a physical fitness coach, you name it, an athlete sport, it's a good idea that you have a couple therapists that you truly, truly trust, that are professionals. And I'm not the kind of person that sits here and thinks that, just because you have a license and you're using an old system, is the only way. But what I think happens is when people are therapists and they've worked with, hundreds of thousands of people, you just kind of start to figure things out. The experience is there, and you can hand that off. If somebody is acting like they're a little bit beyond of what you really want to deal with, because that's not really what you're trying to do, have somebody on hold that you really trust that you can hand them off to. Great advice. Yeah. Not because you're covering yourself legally, though you are, but because it's the right thing for the person in front of you. Third, if you yourself use AI for emotional support, and there is no judgment here, and there's no judgment here, because 1 in 3 people do, know what it is. It is a tool that is good at making you feel heard. It is not good at knowing when you need something it cannot give you. That distinction matters. Keep a human in the loop. Yeah, so, you know, I wonder if you were to look at the stats and how many, like really dig into it, is something like ChatGPT actually helping people? I bet the numbers are, even though it's not a trained Remember, you can sit here and say, well, it's not regulated and it doesn't have a license and this and that. But you have to understand that these AIs are trained on all the knowledge that is out there. They know every system, they know they know everything about therapy. They've read, arguably, it's hard to say that they're not a therapist or they're not a lawyer or they're not an accountant, they're not a designer, they're not a coder, when they can do it pretty much better than most people. But in the medical industry, they hate it when people that didn't go through their process of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that piece of paper can do their job and actually do it well and actually make a difference. What happens is there will be one person who commits suicide or something, and they'll blame it on, oh, you weren't licensed, it's not a medical profession. I guarantee you, there's plenty of people that go to therapists, it still end up committing suicide. So a license and being regulated doesn't necessarily mean guaranteed effectiveness. So let's keep that in mind. I think intent and people that really truly care about something that they do, and they do the best they can to be good at what they do, is going to beat anything. It'll beat a licensed professional who doesn't give a damn any day of the week. So, anyways, the mental health access problem is real. The Dartmouth results are real. The safety gap is also real. These facts don't cancel each other out. They describe a technology that is genuinely useful and genuinely unsupervised at the same time. The question for the solopreneur, like all of us, me and the type of people that I hope that I'm targeting and reaching, isn't whether to use it, it's whether you understand what it is. Subscribe, yeah. So, in this AI world, we just have to understand, right? We are using AI, we're using algorithms, and we need to take some time. And I believe that, yes, it is a good idea. I've been saying this for a while, and I'm starting to see other AI experts and people say the same thing. And I predicted this like 2.5, 3 years ago, and I said, if you look at the past revolution of learn to code, you would hear things like, I can't compete with the kid that was born with a computer in his hand, and coding is just something that's so natural to him. And the young kids, they have the energy, they're on good on computers, and the older guys, um, they just can't keep up with that, right? And that used to be the thing, right? Where every new thing, it was like, oh, whoever was the young guys. I think AI turns it on its head, and I think AI becomes, in many ways, more useful for people that have real life experience, decades of real life experience. Because all those things, all those knowledge based things that happened over the last 20, 30 years that you had to study and practice, you know, editing videos, learning how to code, learning how to design websites, learning, all these things. All those things are going to be taken over by AI that can do it for you. And it's only going to be 6 months to a year before AI is at the point to where you have something capable that kind of beats any human out there when it comes to knowledge based, work. But the one thing that you will have over and above the young generation that's up and coming is you will have the experience, which means you will be able to use AI in ways that just a young person wouldn't know and learn how to do. And I think that's what we're starting to see. And it's just a lot of older people. When I say older, I'm talking, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. They haven't realized this yet because they just assume that this is going to be something that they can't manage and figure out, when very soon they won't have to press buttons and click this and open up apps and learn how to use all these programs. They're just going to have to talk. They're just going to talk to it, and it's going to pull out their experience and just pull value upon value upon value. Anyways, I'm ranting, I'm raving. Maybe it's because I'm in my 50s, so I really want to believe that, but I'm seeing it myself. So until the next video, guys, we're going to keep covering, interesting topics like this. And it's a new channel. Not a lot of viewers, not a lot of followers, but, I'm enjoying doing this because it gives me a reason to dig this stuff up, record a video, and really, really internalize it for myself and for anybody that watches. So until the next video, let's get it.